All right, welcome everyone. My name is Natalie McGruder. I am one of the newest staff members at HEAL, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm very excited to welcome you to this webinar, Rooted and Ready, How BIPOC Communities Are Cultivating Crisis-Proof Food Systems. We have some amazing speakers that are going to share with you today. We have our messaging guide that we're so excited to share with you. And I think we can just go ahead and jump in and get started. So first things first, you might have seen some instructions in the chat where we were trying to encourage you to rename yourself. If you can see my box highlighted, you'll notice I have my name, Heal, and she, her. So we wanted to just help you figure out how to do that. So you'll see the beautiful faces of my colleague Zinab, who you'll hear more from, Rosie, who's gonna be on all things operations and backend with Nishani, and then myself at the bottom. So just another reminder, click those little 3 dots in the upper right corner. If you go to where your face is, you should see 3 dots, and go ahead and hit rename and make sure that we know who you are, who you're with, and what your preferred pronouns are. So Heal Food Alliance, for those of you who are not familiar, I know most of you are, but our mission is to build our collective power to create food and farm systems that are healthy for our families, that are accessible and affordable for all communities, and that are fair to the hardworking people who grow, distribute, prepare, and serve our food while protecting the air, water, and land that we all depend on. So it's a beautiful mission, and we're so thankful to have all of you as our colleagues in achieving this role. So today's agenda, welcoming you right now, getting to our purpose and grounding ourselves in what we're about to be doing together. We're gonna be using the race class narrative to uplift a BIPOC-led vision for resilient food systems. And we have some amazing people who are gonna talk to you today. Representing the H, Health, is Ashley Gripper with Soil Generation and Sankofa Community Farm. Environment, we have Julia Jordan with the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Agriculture, we have Stephanie Morningstar with NEFOC, or the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. And labor, we have Samantha Guerrero with Idaho Organization of Resource Councils. We're gonna have a little bit of Q&A time, and then we'll close out. So if you have questions as you hear from our various speakers, make sure you put them in the chat, and we'll be sure to collect those and start them off when we have the Q&A. So I wanted to share a video from one of the people who guide my work, one of the biggest inspirations in my life. I'm speaking to you here from Huntsville, Alabama, and this woman is from Mississippi. Her name is Fannie Lou Hamer. And as we go into the power of messaging and the power of messaging from BIPOC folks in food and farming systems, I just thought that this was a great way to ground us in this work, to remind us that we come from such a long legacy of doing this work. And I wanted to let Fannie Lou speak to you for a moment, and then I will pass it over to Zinab, and we'll get started with the messaging guide.
I'm thinking about in terms of a better and a greater world for all people. And we can't do that by me in one corner doing what I can do to hurt you and you in the other corner doing the same thing against me. I'm not concerned about just representing black people, because we have poor white that's in the same category with the poor Negro. Well, I want to see a change for the people. And if we can get a good white man, all right, we'll put him in office. But I don't want it all black, and I don't want it all white. I've never thought in terms of violence, of all the things that have been gained by people fighting and going through blood for it. They don't have anything, you know. This, to me, it doesn't make sense. If I hate you because you hate me, I'm no better than you are. And all we want to do is to make these people understand that we are human beings and we can work together in this country, and to have a democracy, that's what we're gonna have to do.
So if you're not familiar with Fannie Lou, she has a really amazing history of speaking and changing the hearts and minds of this nation. And so I really encourage you to seek out more of her words and to know more about her. But at this time, I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to Zinab, who's going to lead us into the work that we're going to do for the rest of today. So.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm just going to make sure y'all can see my screen. Is that good? All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the messaging guide to get this webinar started. So when Heal first started developing the platform for real food in 2014, we knew that many of the solutions we were calling for were not yet politically possible. And we knew that to get to our visions in our platform, the status quo needed to be disrupted. And that's exactly what we feel happened back in March when the pandemic began, and later when folks across the country and the world started rising up in defense of Black lives and against systemic racism. We realized that we are, in fact, in a moment of transformation. And as difficult as the pandemic has been for many of us, it also made space for powerful new narratives to emerge. And one of those narratives is that grassroots, community-led food systems can become the norm, and that these food systems have gotten us through the pandemic, and they will get us through the many challenges climate change will bring. So we created this guide as a tool that can help lift up that narrative, to help you amplify solutions that you're seeing in your own communities in a way that empowers your supporters and inspires more people to share your vision and join your movement. The guide is a result of a collaboration between HEAL staff members and partners, but we're also grateful to ASO Communications, whose race class narrative or RCN framework influenced the guide. The RCN framework is based on the idea that we need to engage our base and persuade the middle. And according to research by ASO Communications, about 50% of our population are part of this persuadable middle. Folks who haven't taken clear sides on an issue yet, but who can be persuaded to fight alongside us if we're able to speak to them in a way that they can relate to. So one of the main purposes of this guide is to connect to that audience. So we hope that you'll find it useful for that. We've also been really intentional in framing, in following some of the principles of the race class narrative framework, including leading with a core value, describing problems with clear villains, and uplifting real solutions and calls to action. And you'll see some of that as we move through the webinar. I will say that the guide is a tool. It's most powerful when used to amplify stories about real people. And our whole purpose in creating this guide is to lift up stories of BIPOC leaders on the ground. So today you'll hear from 4 organizers who speak to HEAL's 4 work areas: health, environment, agriculture, and labor. And we'll also do quick exercises on how their vision and story can be framed using some of the tools in the guide. And with that, I will pass it on to Ashley, who's going to speak to the value of the freedom to make our own food choices. Over to Ashley.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, I'm gonna stop sharing mine.
Can you see it? Okay. Peace and blessings, everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today, and I really appreciate the messaging guide that Heal has put forth, and the effort y'all have put forth to encompass all of the many aspects of our food system. One of the things I've struggled with, though, is the distinctions that occur within our food system in between the core values. So I also come from an academic space where, you know, we are often encouraged to separate health from environment, from agriculture, from labor. And much of what I've been doing in that space is trying to push against the separation and the distinction. My research specifically looks at the impacts of urban ag, farming in a city on the mental health, spirituality, and collective agency of Black people. And I really appreciate that HEAL recognizes the ways that each of these areas is related to the other. So of the core values that they presented in the messaging guide, under the health lens, the one I'm going to focus on is we have the right to make our own food choices. And I want to focus on that one as opposed to the other three, because I believe when we realize and actualize this core value, the other ones will naturally follow. So staying healthy and safe, and being able to get better when you're sick will result from having the right to make our own food choices. And I think that core value is how we define food sovereignty, right? Being able to make your own food choices and participate in this system of seed to plate. So, you know, if you have food sovereignty, then you have food security and you have quality food and produce, you have wellness, you can heal from illness. And I really think it's all connected. Part of the problem related to this core value is, you know, imperialism, enslavement, racism, and capitalism have all tried to change how we relate to our food and how we relate to our plant relatives, among other things. And I believe this system that we live under has deliberately sought to disconnect us, not only from the process of seed to plate, but this system has sought to destroy and disconnect us from our ancestral food ways and practices. So I've been thinking about it a lot lately as dismembering. And dismembering serves a very unique purpose. It seeks to separate people from their spiritual practices and from their food ways and from their relatives, both human and non-human. The goal of dismembering is humiliation, for one, and it's also to prevent remembering. So us reconnecting and remembering all of those things that are a part of us. And when we forget who we are and where we come from, when we forget our ways of knowing and loving and our ways of living, then it is much easier to control us and what we eat. And it is then easier for them to dictate what types of poisonous food gets put into our bodies. And this is a lot of what our farm in Philly stresses. We stress this principle of Sankofa. And I'll touch a little bit more on Sankofa later. But back to dismembering. This is something that I first read about in a book by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And in this book, he talks about the dismembering of the African continent and peoples. And here's a quote that I really think kind of captures what I'm talking about. He says, "The requirements of the slave plantation demanded the physical removal of human resources from the continent to work on land stolen from other peoples, mainly Native Caribbeans and Native Americans. The result was an additional dismemberment of the diasporic African, who was now separated not only from his continent, culture, and his labor, but also from his very sovereign being." So I believe food sovereignty necessitates it necessitates individual and collective sovereignty. I don't think it's possible for us to fully achieve individual or collective sovereignty under our current system. And therefore, what I really believe is that food sovereignty will require us to dismantle capitalism, imperialism, white supremacy, and patriarchy in totality so that we can have real choice in our lives and our food and collectively change how we relate to Mother Earth. So what I present as a solution is really just an example of the work that we've been doing at Sankofa Community Farm in Philadelphia. So at our farm, we teach Sankofa and we do Sankofa. And Sankofa is a word and principle from the Akan people of present-day Ghana. And as my friend and mentor, Chris Bolden Newsome likes to put it, ain't nothing wrong with going back to get what you left. So basically what we're stressing to our youth, to our volunteers, and to our program participants is the importance of knowing and understanding your past so that it shapes our present and shapes how we move forward. So that is the essence of Sankofa. At our farm, we stress the healing power of spirit work and practices, and we practice natural agriculture. Sorry, I forgot I was supposed to be changing the slides so y'all can see some of the different pictures I took today. And when I say spirit work, I mean that we literally pray over every seed that is planted in the field. We pray before and sing gospel during harvest each week. We talk to the plants as we harvest and weed. We let them know exactly what we're doing and why. And we believe and honor all the relationships happening on our farm beneath and above the soil are important. And we try to facilitate a healthy ecosystem by allowing all of those elements and organisms to do their thing without unnecessary interference from us. So each time we enter the field, we must show reverence of the earth. And while there is no single spiritual denomination that we practice, we are an African diaspora-centered farm. So we always give thanks and praise first to the Creator, and we call upon our ancestors for blessing and guidance. Most of the crops that we grow at Sankofa are crops from the African diaspora. Many of them are native to the continent. And this is our effort of remembering African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans, and West Africans to food that has cultural and spiritual significance for us. We, for instance, are growing sorghum. We're growing 2 types of okra, hibiscus, 3 different types of black-eyed peas. We grow bottle gourd and many other crops. And each of these foods has incredible medicinal and health benefits. And our ancestors knew that. But somehow for many of us, Western science has clouded things. We've forgotten what our ancestors knew, and sometimes we've rejected their traditional ways of knowing. But at Sankofa Community Farm, we believe in the literal power of food to heal our bodies, and the power of food and farming to connect us with each other, the Creator, our ancestors, and to the land. And through this connection happens through ritual, through the ritual of hoeing, and through the ritual of weeding, through care for the land, through taking care of the plants, through prayer, and through spirit. So I offer this as a solution to the problem of dismembering in the racist, oppressive, capitalist food system. I offer that we all start to practice Sankofa. Each of us needs to start learning and understanding who we are and who our ancestors were, for better or worse, so that we can discover and realize our role in healing our communities and our roles in the collective fight for liberation. As an action item, I encourage all of us to research and learn about our cultural and ancestral foods. Look up the health benefits of those foods. Connect with folks in your community who are interested in learning and growing and cooking together, and just start growing some stuff. I do want to highlight that we are in really beautiful and yet really trying times. And who knows what food availability is going to look like in a couple of months or years. So I also want to encourage us all to start growing some stuff. There are YouTube videos available, tons of articles that explain the stuff, and start storing foods also for the seasons to come. This, like I said, this is a really interesting time that we're in, and I think that growing food is literally going to save our lives and heal our spirits, heal our bodies, and heal our minds. So that's all I got for y'all today. I think we're gonna be getting into some Q&A in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So if I can quickly call back to a messaging guide and talk about, I think Ashley did a really amazing job of laying out the value, the problem, solution, and the action. But she was lifting up the value that no matter who we are or where we come from, we should all be free to make our own food choices. But the problem is that we've been so disconnected from our land, from our culture, our histories, and our ancestors that it's the journey to making our own food choices is not easy. And Ashley lifted up some great solutions that we need to teach and practice Sankofa in order to reconnect and remember our connections to our history and the land. And as an action, she talked about just growing food. And in the guide, we also lift up like demanding investment in community controlled food systems. So in Philadelphia, maybe that looks like asking the city to invest funds in regional food processing centers to support folks like Sankofa Community Farm, for example.
Zena, I'm sorry, can I jump in real quick? I didn't even mention that. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing in Philadelphia with soil generation, is to design the urban agriculture plan for the city, right? And we're trying to do that in a way that centers racial justice, that uplifts the history behind land being stolen, and the enslaved people that were here in Philadelphia. Thinking about all of those things as we try to make it easier and more not as, it's crazy difficult right now to get land for Black and brown folks in this city. And a lot of what we're doing with designing this urban ag plan is trying to push the city to actually create pathways for people to get land so that they can have access to growing their own food and all of the things that we talk about that we know are part of food sovereignty.
Thank you, Ashley, for finishing that up. And for that for your amazing words. And we're really excited to learn more about what Sankofa is doing. With that, I want to introduce Julia, who is the Sacramento Policy Coordinator for the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability in California. And I'm going to let Julia share her screen.
All right, thank you so much, Zainab. Can you all see and hear that okay? Hear me? All right, see if I can get this up here. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much again for having me. And thank you, Ashley, for kicking us off with really powerful words and with a reminder about the ways that we can be holding the land in reverence. I really appreciate that. So yeah, my name is Julia Jordan. I use they or she pronouns. I am the second one on the right of this photo here, which was taken in Kern County, California. And that's one of the counties that the organization I work with, Leadership Council, works. And I'm here with some advocates and residents during an environmental justice tour, I think in front of some almond orchards there. So I'm the policy coordinator for Leadership Council based in Sacramento. I do statewide policy advocacy work with a focus on agriculture, climate, and also some other issues like transportation and land use. And Leadership Council itself is actually based in Fresno, California, in the Central Valley. And we work with communities up and down the San Joaquin and Eastern Coachella Valleys on a really big range of environmental and social justice issues. We're also a member of the Community Alliance for Agroecology, and which is also a member of HEAL, actually. So yeah, Leadership Council, we do a lot of community organizing and engagement, and that's kind of the main piece of our work. We are also kind of involved in local, regional, and state policy advocacy to try to look at structural change for a bunch of different issues based on the primary concerns of the residents we work with. when necessary, we also do litigation. So we have a few lawyers on our staff as well, because we know that sometimes the the way to get things done is to just go for suing people. And then here in this photo, you can see there's some of our staff doing a N95 mask distribution. So after the pandemic hit, we've had to shift to some more direct response. So, distributing N95s was really important for agricultural, essential workers during the pandemic, and especially during the wildfires, which are ongoing in our state here and that are happening in the midst of COVID, when we have these multiple threats to people's respiratory health and well-being. But the basis of our work pretty much remains the same. So we've shifted to do more direct response, but ultimately the pandemic has just really reinforced a lot of those same issues, the disproportionate health and economic impacts that are facing the communities that we work with, which are low-income communities of color primarily. And it's really, like I said, our work is based on the communities that we work with and the things that are coming up. And many of those communities live in rural, unincorporated areas of California that are surrounded by heavy industrial agriculture. And industrial ag is really a huge industry in California. So we have, it's $50 billion industry with a lot of massive corporate farms, a huge amount of production and export around the country and internationally. And the counties that we work in, Fresno County, for example, is the top producing county with about $8 billion worth of product in 2019. And then Kern County is number 2, and then Tulare County is number 3. So we're really working in these places where there is massive agriculture. And it comes at a really huge cost. So it's, I think Ashley was talking about how all these things are really connected. We're talking about environmental degradation. We're talking about public health, climate change and its impacts, social and economic burden, including on farm workers and other folks in the community, a loss of local and diverse community-oriented food systems, and of traditional knowledge and varieties. So that, again, kind of echoing what Ashley was talking about around the history of active dispossession of land, of devalued knowledge that is actively working against those kinds of indigenous practices and varieties, including seeds and other things. The pic there at the bottom, that's a colleague of mine named Blanca, who works in Tulare County, standing next to a conventional feedlot dairy, which there are tons of these massive industrial dairies in the region. Dairy is the #1 commodity in California, and it's also one of the top polluters of drinking water, and also causes a lot of emissions of methane and other air quality contaminants. So a big issue for us to work on. There we go. So, I think we started to get to this, but the food system that we know is not resilient, right? That is the most common, especially in the San Joaquin Valley. And the pandemic has illustrated that there are all these multiple environmental burdens and health burdens on low-income communities of color, but it's also highlighted this issue of resilience in emergencies and in disasters. So we've seen during COVID, right, there hoarding during the early parts of the pandemic of grocery stores, food banks running out of food as people lost their jobs, COVID cases rising at facilities like Foster Farms because they wouldn't close down, food left rotting in the field because it wasn't economical, and there was also some real food safety and logistics barriers there. And we've also seen this uptick, on the other hand, of people interested in things like backyard gardens, recognizing that our current food system is, it's not inevitable. It doesn't just appear, and really kind of understanding that we can't rely on this loop to just keep going in the current industrial system that we have. And that really highlights that need to think about local and regional solutions and a more direct relationship with the land. So what is the vision, right? There is a different way. And I think we just heard a little bit about one example of that, right? I hear a lot about efforts to make agriculture more sustainable in California by essentially improving carbon sequestration, looking at agriculture's role in climate change, which is extremely important. But it's also not just about carbon, right? It's about redistribution of power and repairing our relationship with the land and with each other. So we're thinking about food and farming systems that protect human health, that restore air, water, and soil, but that also create fair, safe jobs, that provide culturally diverse local food, and take care of natural resources in a long-term way for, you know, future generations. And on top of that, it's also, we're talking about reducing emissions. We're talking about eliminating fossil fuel use and false sort of greenwashed climate solutions that are harmful for communities of color. So it's a goal, right? But how do we actually get there? And this is where I think our work is picking up now, especially is thinking about community engagement with folks who have been left out of these discussions and decision making about where our agricultural system needs to go. People who live near big ag, people who are working on farms, small scale farmers and growers of color, like the folks that are pictured there, some residents we work with in Fresno County. So we're focused on engagement right now, including these groups I just mentioned, and also working to really have residents articulate a clear vision, and including policies and programs and investments, in addition to a lot of the like natural sort of mutual aid and the things that are happening on the ground, to support that in sort of a structural way. And we're also working on building capacity and growing broader networks of community-based organizations, EJ organizations, residents, and farmers who are focused on and accountable to BIPOC communities. So it's really about kind of trying to build that collective power. So the bottom line really is that the solutions that we come up with have to be driven by the needs of those who are most harmed by the current system, and they have to be place-based. So our community engagement is focused on, you know, what does a transition, a just transition in agriculture towards agroecology, what does that look like in Fresno, in Kern, in Tulare, in Riverside? And, you know, when we think about implementing these visions of agroecology, it has to be in grounded, collective, and really creative ways that are tailored to the strengths of and the needs of specific communities. So agroecology in itself is in part participatory, equitable decision making and accountability on top of all the sort of actually farming practices that we're talking about. So the last thing I just wanted to share was at the beginning of the pandemic, we came up with a set of just initial recommendations around a just recovery of the food system and the agricultural system in California. And these are just some of the things that the recommendations that came out of that post-pandemic advocacy. And the goal is really through more community engagement that we will add to and kind of refine this advocacy. So this is really a kickoff point for us in terms of the things that we're seeing as potential ways of moving forward and actually having some grounded solutions to some of these issues. So I'll leave it at that for now. And just thank you so much for the attention, and yeah, look forward to talking more at the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was incredible, and thank you for this important work that you're doing in the Central Valley. So to talk a little bit about the values and solutions that Julia lifted up. So I think the value that she spoke most to from our guide is that all people, regardless of where we live or what we look like, we deserve to live in a safe, resilient, and thriving environment. And the problem, as again Julia lifted up, was the fact that industrial ag is such a large and powerful presence in Central California, and they impact the soil, the air, and the water of the entire region, and that affects the people that live there. And this, in terms of solutions, I think Julia said, that we need to really listen, look for place-based, local, and regional solutions, and really listen to the people who already know what needs to be done. They already know, they already have solutions ready. You just need to like listen to them. And she also did a great job of laying out all the different actions uh, and recommendations that they've already had prepared. So a good thing would be to, at the end of laying out the value, problem, and solution, you could lift up any one of the actions that Julia laid out. And with that, I am going to introduce Stephanie, who is the coordinator for the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. And Stephanie will be building more on the idea of a resilient food system and transitioning to that. Right, Stephanie.
All right, thank you. I just need to be able to share my screen. It's not letting me. Sewakwego, everybody. I'm Stephanie Morningstar. I'm just going to get my screen up for you if I can do that. All right, there we go. So I am the Executive Director of the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust. So glad to be here today. So glad to be rubbing elbows and sharing space with so many brilliant people doing amazing work. Thank you again. I'm also the Resources, Relationships, and Reciprocity Co-Director for the Land Trust. So I work with cultivating the resources, including our relationships and the reciprocity that we need in order to be able to work collectively to advance land and food sovereignty for BIPOC folks all over the territories on Turtle Island. I'm Oneida Turtle Clan, and I'm really invested in this work for many reasons. I wanted to share, this is a photo of our network gathering, our last in-person Skillshare that we had last year on Soulfire farmland on Stockbridge, Muncie, Mohican territory. This is a small subset of about 400 member farmers and land stewards and food systems actors across the Northeast who've gotten together to do three things: to advance skill sharing, to break the isolation of being a farmer of color or on territory in the Northeast, and to advance policy. So one of the things that came out of this NEFOC network, some of these Skillshare meetings, was the recognition that land access was the #1 barrier to achieving health and well-being in our communities. And that's really where I came in. I was doing a lot of work rematriating land, like challenging that concept of land rematriation and what that actually means, and challenging folks to return land through land-based wealth redistribution. Some of the data around, we don't need to go through all the statistics, but one that really stands out is this national statistic from the USDA Ag Census of 2017 that white landowners currently control between 95 to 98% of the farmland in the US and nearly 100% of the farmland in the Northeast. And as we know, and we don't need to go through all of the history of that, this is not an accident of history. This was a very specific systemic set of systemic issues. So as an herbalist and as a healer and somebody who works in system change, I wanted to ensure that addressing this land-based wealth redistribution, that we're actually getting to the root cause of the solution and not just patching it over with land access, because land access in and of itself doesn't actually solve a lot. It's about land access and then also doing systems change work around access to the resources, skills, trainings, and community needed in order to truly uplift and create a life on land that is regenerative and resilient. This is just a very quick graphic that shows just the stark contrast, and farmers, white farmers and farmers of color, just in 3 states in the Northeast. And you can paint this across the Northeast very specifically, but about 1.5% of farmers in the Northeast are farmers of color. So the first part of our work has been to basically recruit and retain more farmers of color, but not just speaking specifically to farming, but certainly the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust is rooted in agroecology and agroecological indigenous ways of being, doing, and knowing. So really looking at that and wondering how many folks are actually practicing other types of feeding our communities that aren't being recognized in these demographics. The goal of our land trust is to create or advance land sovereignty. Now, I know that that is a very encoded word. The word sovereignty is certainly, honestly, something I don't feel like under the current colonial system that we'll be able to achieve. So really what we've been doing is something that we almost consider a mode of harm reduction in this work. So knowing that our communities need to get on land, we need to not only collectively heal between ourselves and our communities, but also heal with the land and our relationships to the land. So we've developed this vision that our true vision would be land sovereignty in the Northeast region through permanent and secure land tenure for Black, Indigenous, POC land stewards and farmers who will work with the land in a sacred manner that honors our ancestors' dreams for sustainable farming, human habitat, ceremony, native ecosystem restoration, and cultural preservation. We're doing this through a hybrid model land trust that focuses specifically on two things: conservation and community land trust development. So these are two worlds that very rarely overlap with one another, and in the vision that we've manifested, there is no division between those two things. So, you know, we want to be able to create sustainable communities that actually center Indigenous ways of being, doing, and knowing, and bringing those global Indigenous ways of being onto land to build relationship with each other and the land. There are a few things about NEFOC Land Trust that make us unique, specific to some of the other land trusts out there. There aren't many BIPOC-led land trusts. We're one of them. There's a wonderful collection of Indigenous-led land trusts. We are Black Indigenous-led. And again, we're a hybrid model that really creates this really beautiful blend toward the outcome being health, wealth, and joy, truly. So not just land for the sake of land, but land for the sake of our health and well-being outcomes as peoples. And part of that health, wealth, and joy includes the health, wealth, and joy of our non-human relatives of creation, and creation being respected as a living being. So we're really looking at lots of different strategies in order to be able to create this, this reclamation of our joy, basically. So some of the strategies that we're working on that, you know, I feel like the first two folks who spoke are basically laying it all out for us too. So, you know, just sort of picking up on where they left off and really looking at that co-creative community-led systems change work that is driving this. You know, we're not looking at a top-down leadership model. Our leadership model is very decentralized and as much as we can be within the nonprofit industrial complex. And we're advancing that even further with developing cooperatives. We are BIPOC specific and BIPOC centered. All of our policy are uplifting the needs of our communities. We are very, very hyper aware that the Northeast is actually mostly unceded territory, meaning that there are very few treaties or cessations for Indigenous land on those territories, meaning it's truly stolen land. Not that the other land with treaties isn't in some way stolen land. So because of that, we've actually instituted an Indigenous consultation and partnerships protocol, meaning that any piece of land in any of the territories we're working on are specifically, we have to engage, and we're building partnerships and relationships with those communities and with the traditional leadership of those communities. Again, we're a hybrid land trust. We're focusing on land-based wealth redistribution, so calling for reparations and rematriation of land. We're looking at regenerative climate solutions that transcend carbon drawdown or carbon neutral farming. So really looking at a holistic model for regenerative climate change that really uplifts the Indigenous just transition model. And again, we're focusing on decentralizing our leadership and community-driven leadership. This is a model of our current programming. This is evolving and shaping and morphing as we go, but really it's focusing on building that community resilience, advancing land access, creating Indigenous partnerships, bringing in cultural preservation, personhood, ceremony, because it is all, you can't, like Ashley was mentioning earlier, you can't separate any of these things out. It's really a beautiful Venn diagram that in the center will really create the resilience that we need. And I also wanted to speak to the idea of resilience and focusing on hopefully one day we don't need to continue to build resilience, because resilience in and of itself is acknowledging a permanent stressor. And I really want to acknowledge that the goal for us is to be able to feel ease at some point. And yes, we need to be able to be strong and flexible and bend and respond. But I want to challenge the concept of resilience to also think about, you know, how can we, at some point, with the end goal of not needing to necessarily always have to respond to colonial pressures. And that's a dream, it's a vision, it's not something I'll see in my lifetime, but just wanting to think about that and to put that seed in people. So some of the things we're doing, as I mentioned, is we are working on a reparations policy. We're obviously supporting the reparations bills that are out there, and we have a reparations map that's currently going a little bit of rebranding. It's a wealth-based redistribution map, a land-based wealth redistribution map. You can take a look at the website for that right now. We have quite a few projects on there, hundreds of acres of land that are being rematriated and gifted to folks and returned to folks. And the resources needed to be able to build a better infrastructure. We're also working to consult and partner with Indigenous communities. We're working to rematriate land, be able to focus on delivering tools and resources like voluntary taxation, cultural respect easements, in order to be able to resituate Indigenous hands on land. Here's a slide about that. And what that is offering permanent in perpetuity access to land.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And then, oh, sorry.
Point out that, I mean, we can listen to this for a few hours.
I know. Sorry, lots more to share, but thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, do you have any closing thoughts though?
Yeah, my closing thoughts would be this final slide that I was showing is that we can't do this alone, and we can't do this in a silo. So that final slide was just showing a partnership that we're embarking upon with Soulfire Farm, the Black Farmer Fund, Corbin Hill Food Project, and Farm School NYC that's focusing on building a basically Black marketing cooperative in New York State as one Black farmer cooperative in New York State, which is just one project that we're working on as an ecosystem. So starting to think about bridging out and branching out and getting out of our silos and collaborating with one another, not only in the spirit of that, that Venn diagram, but also in the spirit of not hoarding the wealth that we're trained to do in the industrial complex of nonprofits. So just thinking about that and building partnerships. And I would say, reach out. I'll put my email in the chat. I'll put our website and everything in the chat. Please let us know if you want to connect. I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was really beautiful. Loved your framing of resilience, and that we can hopefully stop talking about it soon. So just real quick, the value that Stephanie lifted up was that no matter who we are, we want to be able to provide for our loved ones and our communities through moments like these, but also in the future. And want to highlight again that Stephanie mentioned that we want to eventually feel at ease and not like we're fighting a constant battle with the elements, right? And the problem is that throughout history, we've been indigenous land and water rights have been trampled over, Black communities have been disenfranchised, and people of color have been kept from owning the land that they need to, fend for their communities. And in terms of solutions, we know that we would all benefit from going back to traditional ways of farming and ancestral food ways that focused on stewarding the land and nourishing the soil rather than extracting from it. And some of the solutions that we can use to get there is to heal the land and to heal our relationships with the land. And in terms of a call to action, Stephanie showed us their reparations map. We need to talk about investing in the transition of land and resources to BIPOC producers in the form of land trust, but also in the form of reparations, and calling for larger systemic transformation as well. with that, I want to welcome our last speaker, Samantha, who who is the Agriculture and Food Community Organizer for the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils, and also the co-founder of the Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance. And Samantha will be talking about dignity for all workers and their families. You should be able to share screen now.
Let me share my screen. Okay, there. So hi everyone, I'm so happy to be on this amazing panel. My name is Samantha Guerrero. My pronouns are she, hers, ella. I am a daughter of Mexican immigrants from the state of Michoacán in San Luis Potosí, Mexico, and I am from Idaho. I am from here and I am from there too. I consider myself an immigrant rights activist, which led me into the world of environmental issues. Many of the issues we are seeing in our immigrant communities and BIPOC communities are caused by the food system currently in place. So I work for the nonprofit organization, Idaho Organization of Resource Councils, and I'm also a member of our newest chapter, Visión 2C, which is focusing on farm worker issues in our Canyon County area. We are a grassroots member-led organization working on environmental justice issues. And our members choose the issues they want to work on, and we are here to help with resources to help empower our members to take on issues to improve our well-being of our communities, sustain family farms and ranches, transform local food systems, promote clean energy, and advocate for responsible stewardship of Idaho's natural resources. As a bilingual community organizer working on ag and food issues, I have been connecting with our local food growers and our Latinx community in Idaho to see what the most pressing issues are in our community. Many of our Latino people came here to work in agriculture, having a rich culture and connection with the land. Yet we don't see many Latino farmers while they make a large percentage of the workforce and many who are undocumented. And so while my job is to do organizing during the pandemic, we decided to do rapid response and for agriculture workers in our area, since there's a lack of resources for them to depend on if they are to lose their job. And since their wages are very low, they also have issues with accessing healthcare and food, which is, you know, they're the ones harvesting and cultivating our food, yet they can't afford food that is pesticide free, you know, and causes them less harm. So us being aware of the conditions that farm workers have to endure to bring us our food, when COVID-19 reached Idaho, we knew that immediate action, we had to take immediate action to help those individuals who grow, harvest, and package the food we enjoy. So we partnered with local organizations, nonprofits, to form what is the Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance. And we have organizations like the ACLU of Idaho helping us with translations, Community Council of Idaho, which is the only organization in the state of Idaho serving our farm worker community with Head Start programs and service-based programs. IORC, Immigrant Justice Idaho, the Northwest Center for Alternatives to Pesticides, Bodega of Idaho, and United Farm Workers and Visión 2C, which is our newest chapter of IORC. And so with this alliance, we decided we wanted to help meet the gaps that we were seeing in our communities. Of course, it was like funding, so we created a mutual aid fund with the goal of raising $1 million to go to undocumented individuals. And as of right now, we're in the processing of distributing our first $100,000. Other types of aid, we've worked to get face masks out to farm workers. With our Visión 2C chapter, we knew that pesticides were a big issue we were seeing. Farm workers were sprayed with pesticides, leading them to get sick, and really there was little resources for them to get help. And so although these face masks do not protect them from pesticides, it was a quick thing to just help them be protected during COVID, since there were no protections in place, and still there aren't any protections during the pandemic in place for farm workers. We've also been working on getting information out in Spanish for individuals who are monolingual, since in our state we have been seeing that information isn't being translated or getting out to our communities in time, as well as storytelling as a way to get information out, videos, and advocacy. As far as like food, we've been hearing a lot of people who don't have transportation to food pantries, or who live in rural areas, many who are of our Latino community don't have access to food. So we partnered with organizations getting excess food out, local, nutritious, pesticide-free, out to the farm workers and their families. We have amazing people in our community coming through. And so partnering with organizations like Community Council of Idaho has been great in that they've been able to get gloves to protect workers from getting certain acids on their hands from hot fields, as well as needed long sleeve shirts and other types of materials that they need, which our mutual aid fund is also being used to provide whatever individuals may need, whether it's like work equipment or paying bills that you know, that they can't get other resources to do so. So what we have seen is, like, during the pandemic, what it has revealed really about these systems is just the environmental racism, such as being sprayed by pesticides and not receiving notification before, you know, spraying in cornfields, and, you know, notifications not being available in the language appropriate for the people living in the area. And so yeah, with the relief fund, we're hoping to continue this on during COVID and after COVID, to continue to help, you know, with the people who are the ones most affected by our food system. We've been seeing that food insecurity has been exacerbated. And of course, we know that it's connected with low wages that aren't adequate to support the living conditions in the states we reside in. And many of this comes from flawed policies that continue to subsidize corporate industrial farms that continuously harm our communities and environment. So while we have folks who are hungry in the state of Idaho, there are big corporate companies that are choosing to dump their food. So, you know, we continue to lose small farms, and the opportunities for BIPOC folks to become farmers are slim, but there is a want and a need. Our current agricultural production thrives on exploitation of BIPOC folks and extractivism of our resources. And so really, our organization supports local food systems, and during these times we have seen the importance and the need to continue to support our local food systems, which has also allowed us during this time to do activities such as gleaning to get more food out, and food that isn't overly processed, you know, with high sugars and preservatives, which lead to health issues such as diabetes, which is prevalent among our BIPOC communities. And some other things that we have been working on as well is just urging our government to take action in protecting workers, and also implementing OSHA standards during this time. So that.
Thank you so much, Samantha. That was incredible. Y'all are doing some amazing work in Idaho, amazing necessary work. And I will, and I'm going to quickly share screen and take us through the last value slide. Sorry, hope y'all can see that. So as Samantha pointed out, we all deserve safe and dignified working conditions, regardless of what we do, our immigration status or gender. And COVID-19 has really put a spotlight on how big corporations are putting profit over the health and safety of working people. And in Iowa, that shows up in how big agricultural corporations are neglecting the health of their farm workers who are exposed not only to COVID-19, but have been exposed to pesticides for a very long time. And the solutions that that IORC and Samantha's other organization that I can't recall is doing is that they're working directly with farm workers, and they are already implementing some of the solutions that they need, like providing information, by providing PPE, and by working directly with the farm worker communities. And a clear call to action, again, as Samantha pointed out, was to join together and demand that Congress compel OSHA to implement and enforce a mandatory standard that requires all employers to prioritize worker safety first. And that can involve asking folks to call the governor, asking folks to tweet at OSHA. We've done quite a bit of this at HEAL in the last few months as well. Yeah, and that concludes the last of our value slides. So I am going to stop sharing, and now I think we can open it out to questions. And I'm gonna.
And Zainab, I think we already have a few questions that came from people in the chat that we put in the notes document there.
Thanks, Natalie. We have so many questions. So I'm gonna just take it from the top. Starting with one from Tim from WORC. Change is hard, and this is for everybody. Change is hard, and in many ways we're moving backwards. How do you stay hopeful, and what do you tell people who say it can't be done or have given up on the fight for justice? Does anyone want to take that?
I can, that's a big one, but I think, we can all collaborate on this too. And I think that's the point, right, to this is that we can't lift this alone. So relying on our friends and our communities and the mutual aid networks that are, coming together so beautifully. One example that we did just recently with HEAL and Castanea Fellowship, Soulfire Farm, Black Farmer Fund, Me Folk, we all got together, and when COVID hit, we just kind of jumped into action and did a BIPOC Farmers COVID Skillshare series that, really brought together, I think, over 1,000 people nationally, both in all over Turtle Island. And it was really just this beautiful way to collectively freak out together and collectively grieve together and collectively strategize together and learn from one another. So I think that times are hard, but times, this is, as a healer, somebody who works with herbalism and works with systems and body systems, you see these things, these eruptions happen, right? You see these abscesses and these infections happen. And if you just heal over them without addressing the root cause, things are going to finally, hopefully, come to a head, or you're going to get a systemic infection. And what we're doing is we are in our own way together. We are all healers together. We're healing together, and we're working together and taking shifts and creating that Venn diagram to build that resilience. And I think that when somebody's feeling tired, you know, like I definitely felt, I had COVID in the beginning of all of this, and I really relied on my own community to like lift that weight for a bit with me, so I could feel a bit of rest and a bit of ease and pause amidst something so challenging.
I could jump in too. Thank you, Stephanie. For me, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but Sankofa is really like something that I think about. And what I mean by that is like thinking about what my ancestors near and far literally went through, and the things that they endured and kept pushing and fighting against. So, you know, recently, my recent ancestors, my dad passed away earlier this year, and my mom passed away 9 years ago. So when I think about the struggles that they endured as a result of this system that we're in, the way they didn't have access to the food that would heal their bodies and their spirits and their minds, right? There's no other choice that I really have. And I also think in many ways, all of the ancestors more distant, when I read about what they went through, when I talk to people and in conversation with other Black folks, and we talk about, you know, the things that have been passed down from generation and generation, the stories, the history, I really, like, I low-key feel like it's disrespectful for me to give up. And I understand that, you know, it might feel like that, the weight of the world and all of the pain and stuff is hard to bear, but I just think about the sacrifices they made towards creating a better life, a better world, a better society for us to live in. And I want to be able to offer that to the generations that come after me.
Well said, Ashley. I completely agree with that, and just want to echo both Stephanie and Ashley's comments on that, like communing with those that you love, staying in relationship, and staying ready. You know, we're about to go into a pretty intense election season right now. I mean, we're already in it. And there's likely to be some political instability, to be honest, you know, but there is no, I would agree that it feels like there's no other option but to keep going, you know. And the only other thing I'll add is to really kind of localize it and to stay close to home and get really specific with the goals. So I think for me, it's a matter of keeping this really long-term vision in mind. Like a lot of the things that I want in terms of change, they are going to be hard, they are going to be intense and long-term and in community and in collaboration. But there are also really short-term goals that I think we can all have. So we can think about what is something that I might be able to do in the next month or in the next 6 months, and think through that with people that have similar goals, right? And doing it from a place of strength, doing it from a place of recognizing what are the assets, what are the strengths that we already have in the communities that we work with, and how can we use those to push for things to fill the gaps where nobody's coming for us, and to actually do those things in the short term while we're thinking about these long-term visions. And that for me has really helped sort of keep my head in the game.
The next question is for Ashley, and it's, how do we help heal this dismembering in ways that aren't paternalistic? And it's from Andrea.
So I think, like, to keep it honest, it depends on like who you are, right? For white folks trying to do this work in Black and brown communities, I don't have the answer for that. But if this is coming from a person trying to do the work in their own community, I think, you know, for me, coming from an academics, or like having been in academic spaces, is something I think about a lot, especially when I'm doing the work like with and in my community. Honestly, just what I try to lead by is recognizing and understanding and believing and practicing that Western academics, Western knowledge is not, there's no hierarchy in terms of ways of knowing. And I value the ways, the many multitude of ways that my community knows things and understands things and feels things more than I value what I've learned in the academy. So for me, a lot of it, in terms of like trying to not be paternalistic, is because literally folks that I'm working with know more than I do. So I'm just trying to always practice being a student, and listening and learning from what folks are sharing. And then, you know, if I have something to offer, I ask if my, you know, if that is something that they want, you know, folks want, because I know I don't have the answers. And I think the challenge is when we walk into our communities or other communities and act like we know all of the answers and we know what's best for them, when the reality is their lived experience speaks more to allows people to know more about a situation than textbooks and articles do.
Thank you, Ashley. And I think Andrea has a comment saying that they were thinking of predominantly white efforts around nutrition education. And so if anybody else also wants to answer that, feel free. But if not, I have a question for Julia from Chantel. As we consider the need for our movement to be long-term and cross-generational, what are the ways your organization might be tackling building collective power at the same time as cultivating a deeper culture that can be inherited by youth or the next generation?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I think a lot of our work at this point is engaging folks and starting from a place of kind of talking about experiences, talking about, you know, I don't really want to use the word educating, but bringing up sort of exchanging information and knowledge, different types of knowledge around these issues. And it, you know, in some ways, I think there is a different way that you do that when it comes to youth. But there's, for example, you know, in Fresno, California, there's a group called the Freedom School, and they work with youth, getting their hands in the soil, you know, growing food. And I think making sure that we're collaborating with groups like that are doing that kind of direct, you know, work with folks who are then able to carry things into the future, that are able to sort of teach youth and get the next generation to be in relationship with the land in the way that we're talking about, engaging with the land, trying to build out and carve out more spaces like that where we can have not, you know, intergenerational experience. I would say that, you know, for us, I think my organization isn't the lead on those efforts, but I think we want to be in partnership with that. I think that is exactly the kind of collective power building and narrative shift and change that I think is required as the foundation of this work.
Thank you, Julia. I have a question for Stephanie next from Grace, who is in a new job as an outdoor education coordinator at an elementary school. Do you have advice or resources about how to go about incorporating things like food justice, environmental justice, BIPOC history, and your current work into their teachings?
Well, I would say the best thing to do, and well, I don't want to say the best thing, but I would say start with your local community first and ensure that you're taking a look at what's going on, right? Who's actually uplifting the work in your own community. So outreach and engagement and relationship building, I think that's really where you'd want to start. I don't know who you are or what demographic you represent, so I don't really have a lot of, you know, where you're located or whatever, but I would say that's probably a good start. Take a look at things like, there's an amazing wealth of resources on the Heal Alliance food on the website and on the Soulfire Farm action steps. I can put those in the chat. Those are some really great ways to just get like a really good framework and foundation in the language of this work and in the work that, how are you, what's the purpose, right? Like who are you representing? I don't remember if you said, is this person a white person or a person of color? I don't know. Well, that would make a difference, right? So, but either way, checking in with your community and checking in with the folks surrounding you. And also, I think that Leah is pointing out a really great point here in the chat. So it really depends on who you are and situating yourself in the work, right? So just pointing that out, that if you're working in BIPOC community, you're going to be steeped and rooted in your community. Whereas if you're wanting to address these types of issues from a white space, so asking yourself, why are you addressing these issues from a white space? Whose voices are you including? And right in one of the beginning, I think every one of us has really spoke to this in some ways, but that co-creative sort of, working with our communities for our communities. By Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust is driven 100% by BIPOC voices and minds and hearts. So we're doing the work in our communities. We're looking for allies and siblings to support us in that. But what I'm kind of wondering is this more about self-education or education of maybe staff and training staff? So there's a lot of context missing here, but I don't want to make assumptions about who you are or what your needs are. So I would say just continue to think about situating yourself in the work. There's a lot of pre-work that needs to happen if you want to work with BIPOC organizations. The first thing would be to unlearn and then relearn a lot of things before you can even step into those spaces. So again, I don't know who you are, so I can't really fulsomely answer your question.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have a question for Samantha, which is, how can we help mitigate some of these issues as consumers? I'm guessing it's like, by issues you mean making sure that working people have safe, have the PPE they need to protect themselves, the information they need, and safe working environment in general.
I mean, I think the best thing is to be a conscious consumer, right? Shopping locally, knowing who you're buying from, knowing how they're growing the food, whatever you're buying, whether it's produce or if it's meat, what process are they using, and what are the conditions? A lot of the meat that we get from the store come from concentrated feeding lots, like where they have animals piled up. And even if like you get like, let's say your eggs that are labeled free range, I mean the chickens aren't in cages. I mean, they're not in cages, but they are roaming around in like their own feces, and that's what you get. So we don't see that. We see a lot of greenwashing, like this is free range, or it's meat made in the USA when it's imported from other countries. So when we're not paying attention to what exactly is happening in the process, we don't know what's happening, with the animals, if they're being abused. We don't know the conditions that they're being kept in and what we're really consuming. We don't know the conditions that the people are being exposed to. Whether they're being treated with dignity, whether they're given benefits, given time off, overworked, or any of that information. But if you know who you're buying from, if you know your farmers, it's a good company, then that gives you peace of mind, and it strengthens our local economies. It gives us the ability to have food sovereignty and be less dependent on these big companies.
Thank you, Samantha. And we'll have one last question, which is to Julia, but if anyone else wants to add in, feel free. It's a big one. Is there a way to get big ag land back into the hands of smallholder farmers?
Yes, I think that we heard about reparations. So number one, and this is me speaking, just I think that there should be land reparations. We know that there are countless, policies that historically have actively made it illegal for Asian Americans, Black people, Latinx people to own land. And this is not just, it's a huge way that intergenerational wealth is built. So it's not only are we talking about mental, physical, and spiritual health and healing, which I think we heard a lot about today, and about the capacity to repair our relationship with land, we're also talking about economic justice. So I think that's number one. The other thing is that there are a lot of older farmers across the country who are going to retire, who are going to stop farming. So I think that there should also be a system of providing subsidized ownership for small scale farmers, but not just small scale, right? BIPOC, new and beginning farmers, to make that transition possible and easier. And that might include things like assistance with down payment, with interest rates, with infrastructure improvements to make sure that the soil is farmable, that the land is okay, and not just pushing people of color to marginal lands, which is what's happened to this day. So dealing with some of those costs that make it hard and some of those barriers. And then the last thing I'll say is in California, there are some land conservation projects and programs through the state. So there's like the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, which provides incentive funding to essentially keep easements on land so that it can't be converted into urban uses. So essentially to prevent sprawl development, which is a big problem here in California. And so one way to think about this would be to integrate just land access into conservation programs. So thinking about when we're doing a conservation easement and taking land, that making sure that it's not turning to urban uses, how do you then prevent that from just kind of recirculating to those who just have always had that access, and start to think about ways that we can integrate BIPOC ownership and small scale farm ownership with those conservation programs.
Thank you, Julia. And we only have 3 minutes left. So if anyone has anything real quick to say.
Yeah, this is Navina. I'd love to just jump in and first of all, offer really deep gratitude to all of our speakers, Julia, Ashley, Stephanie, and Samantha, for all of the, not only sharing with us today, but all of the deep work you are doing in your own communities to make the vision that we are all seeking real. We know that there have been, that the way that the systems and structures were set up were not designed for our people to thrive, and you all are confronting that and making it real for all of us. And we know that the folks who joined this call, there are 200 people who showed up for this, that this group of people knows that the status quo work and that we're all seeking some kind of change in that. But the status quo, of course, doesn't work for most people in this country, right? For the majority of the 340 million people in this country, the status quo doesn't work. So one of our big goals with doing this work today and releasing this messaging guide, but using the race class narrative, is to reach many more of those folks so that they can come along this journey with us. So of course, everything that we do is rooted in the leadership and the stories of folks who are on the ground doing the work, and we want to be able to reach those broader audiences. So please look out for that guide from us on Thursday or Friday this week. We'll be sending it out to you, and we'll include a recording of this webinar. We'll include links to the speakers and their websites. You can follow up with them directly for more information about the amazing work that they're doing, and we'll be sharing that guide as well, so you can see that too. So again, thank you so much, and thanks Zainab for carrying us through this webinar, and for all of your work creating the messaging guide, and of course the ASO Communications, who have really led this work on race class narrative to help us reach that broader base and make systemic change together. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Navina, and thanks everybody for joining. Thank you to the amazing panel of speakers. Thank you.